attention to that. The country reads that. They don't want to have a black eye. They don't want to have that going on. So again, that's why people here in the U.S. who know about it and can give specifics and can give any evidence, sending that to the people in the State Department that are doing those reports, I think is very helpful to them and also to the country, because then they know that they're being watched and they're a little more careful.
I'm sorry, Syria, but what happened was, for the most part, is those countries were so accustomed to do whatever they do. It became like the new normal. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the education, so it has to be on both sides.
Right.
The people, also those actors, the governments, need to be educated on something.
I think to get more information, more factual information, not just hysterical, people are dying, but Joe Smith on November 5th, blah, 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 in this city was killed because he did blah. Very, very specifics, the exact sort of time, place, who, what, where, the real specifics. I think that's very appreciated by the State Department and by UNESCO and all these UN non-governmental organizations. So I think that's very helpful to the human rights community to really give specifics and educate people, not just say, oh, it's bad in my country, but exactly what happened. So I think that's something that people can do. And again, don't be disappointed because it didn't turn overnight. It's like a large ship. You can't. It takes a little while to move.
Right.
But if you don't turn the wheel, it's not going to move at all. So it's as far as doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Recently I was reading a report from the State Department, and there was a lot of reports.
It's HLONTOR.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'm one of the executive member of Togolese Diaspora in the United States. My background is healthcare professional, but also I like business and community outreach. I'm involved with many non-profit organizations also. Recently, I was in Togo when on August 19, when the demonstration for reform in Togo happened, and the population want to get more involved and change in Togo. They went to the government for demonstration, and they allowed them to do so. But in the event, people get injured and killed during the demonstration, and it was all over the news. I think most of the time, even government is willing to do things. There are some people who are opposed to change, and it's very unfortunate that the human rights are not fully respected in our country. Fear of losing power, fear of not to have control over the population, and it's a lot of things that is going on in Africa. Like we said, on both sides, we need education and sensibilization. It has to be ongoing stuff that, sometimes people have narrow mind, and they think that, this is the way they think about themselves alone, instead of, if you are in power, you have, bigger picture. But people don't have that bigger picture. They are in the wrong seat. And, it's a lot of work we have to do. And we have to use, we have to use the young population to start from there, because, the grassroots is the most important part of the human right. Yeah, it's a lot of work we need to do. For example, the reason why I went to Togo in the first place is for the AGOA Forum. Prior to that, I was involved in the Karen show that we were trying to, send a message to the government that the Togolese diaspora in the United States, first of all, we are not for, political, aspect, but we are mostly for community and economical growth of our citizens in the United States first. And also, without, our community safety and the human rights, we can't do anything. That most of the time, the government think that everything that we, the diaspora want to do or the population want to do, it comes to, political thing. Everything is, about politics. It's why they try to get control over the population, blind them, suppress them, deprive them from their, basic rights. Right to vote, right to live, right to do anything. That way, when they control them, they can do whatever, they abuse them, they put fear in us not to talk. We don't have those basic rights. And I think from the government side, if they can have, education on human rights, basic human rights, on the population side, basic human rights, it doesn't have to, stop there. It has to be a continuation, like we have the Human Rights Committee in Togo, and they denounce all these things. What happened is people are not, let me quote unquote, not punished for those, abuse and those human rights violation, and it continues, years after years and after years. I think the most important thing is to involve the diaspora, and I think the future of Africa, countries is to involve the diaspora. Like in Togo right now, one of the thing the protesters, in the country want is to have the diaspora, involved in the election, like they have the right to vote. That way, is one of the change that we can contribute to our country, and also have a clear way of elections also, that everything will be transparent for everybody to know how to go. The game will be clear. How are we going to go and vote and things like that.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we wrote to the government that those type of things are not acceptable. Students have the right to demonstrate, and ask for raise for their professor's salary, but they have the right to live, not to be killed.
Okay.
But for political, things, we are not directly involved as Gddhr USA.
Okay, that's very good. I'm going to let Dr.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be here with people of Africa, people of African descent, and all of those who love Africa. It's really a pleasure to talk about Africa. We have to find solutions. I'm from Congo Brazzaville. Professionally, I'm a professor of mathematics at Howard University, but I'm also the national coordinator of the National Congress for Democracy, which is an organization that deals with political issues in Africa, focusing particularly on the Congo Brazzaville. As we all said earlier, that when we talk about all these African countries, there's so much similarities. When I'm looking at these pictures here, I see exactly, I could have said this is Congo, or I could have said this is Togo. I would have said many African countries that are dealing with this. But at the center of it is greed. What is this all these young men needs? They only need a living. They only need to be able to go to school, the opportunity to have a decent life, to raise their family, to grow and expand. But yet, we have leaders in these African countries who have put our population hostage. So all these people, or even some of us who are here, we are here simply because we can't go back to our countries. We are here doing the things we're doing here in this country because it's not by choice. It's sometimes because we are constrained to be in these countries. I came here to talk about Congo-Brazzaville. And before I talk about Congo, I wanted to give you just a short summary of the history, but it's very similar because Congo became independent in 1960 and Gabon became independent in 1960. We have in 1960, so 19 years later, the current president, who's there right now, you all know him, his name is Sassou Nguesso, became president through a military coup. So Sassou became president in 1979.
Wow.
When Jimmy Carter was president, he was president. When Reagan was president, he was president. When Bush the father was president, he was president. When Clinton was president, he was president. When, who came after? It was Bush the son was president, he was president. Obama was president, he was president. Trump now is president, he's still president and still wants to be in power. So in 37 years, the US has 7 presidents. In 37 years, Sassou has been a bloody dictator, killing his own people. Economically, the country, Congo, is the 4th oil-producing country in Africa, just as Gabon was 3rd or 4th or 5th now, I'm not sure what the numbers are. But yet, small population, you have 2 million people in Gabon, we have 5 or 3 million people in Congo. The country has had so much money. From 1997 to 2016, the Congo, from a budgetary perspective, has had $70 billion available for its budget from 1997 to 2016. $70 billion available under the budget all these years. But yet, today, the country is bankrupt. Right now, they're coming to the IMF to beg the IMF to give them money. So Gabon did the same thing. I think they were doing. Bongo's regime is to reinforce against Sassou's regime, and people are on the street and dying simply because this money is being mismanaged. The greed is at the center. So basically, economically, the country is bankrupt. Politically, we have a presidential election, but yet the person who won the election is in jail. His name is General Mokoko. And every political opposition members are being arrested. And as Malik said earlier, we have small jails where maybe it was planned for 300 people, and they're putting thousands of people there, and every day people are dying. Now, I have a very negative perspective about Africa, what needs to be done. So when it comes about human rights, the only thing I'm going to say is that there's a correlation between democracy, how advanced the country is democratically with its human rights. Processes within the country, there's going to be a better respect for human rights in that country. So since we have no democracies in most of these African countries, the president, in fact, is the legislative, is the judiciary, is the executive. I mean, it's all the power, it belongs to him. And so his purpose is not to build the country, his purpose is to... So therefore, if you now want to talk about your right, look, I have a right to go to school, build the schools. He's going to say, well, we don't want to educate people, we want to keep them confused, we want to keep them ignorant. Because if you can keep them confused and ignorant, then what? You can keep them enslaved. So what I'm simply saying is that slavery is not dead in Africa. Slavery is still alive in Africa. It has just to change form. Slavery is a different form. Europeans came to Africa in the past to get labor forces. They took men, women, brought them in the Americas, to make America strong. But yet when it was happening with Europeans, we also in Africa were playing role. Africans were selling their own brothers into slavery for small things, to get mirrors and to get small things, salt, or whatever they needed to have. Today, the same thing is happening. Europeans are coming, they're not coming for labor force, they're coming for our natural resources. They're coming for your oil in Gabon, they're coming for your timber, and the same thing in my country. And you have slave masters. Sassou Nguesso is a slave master. Bongo is a slave master. Why? Because they are playing the role of selling their own people, selling their own countries for their own personal benefit. These people have billions of dollars in their accounts. Right now, Congo Brazzaville is bankrupt. Sassou, in two accounts of two of his ministers, has $5 billion in China.
Wow.
Some money will find in Portugal, so all over the place, but Africa. So they're taking all this money, putting them in the bank account in these countries, making these countries strong economically, and they're coming to us. We are going to this country and borrowing money. Our own money is being used again, with interest placed in those. So when I'm looking at Africa, I am wondering what's need to be done.
Excellent.
Very good. Oh, sorry.
Very good. That's in-depth explanation of the situation. Thank you so much. I think the audience is
conversation in perspective of the United States. One of the major issues in the United States during elections is immigration. You can see based on the polls that this is something which is at the core of the interests of the American citizens. Now, the question of immigration, sometimes when we look at the question of immigration or the issue of immigration, is people coming here to look for what? They're coming to the United States, they're trying to come here, they're trying to cross the Rio Grande, whatever it means, is to look for better opportunities. Well, is there any opportunity in their countries? Well, yeah, there are, but they don't have access. And when you look at human rights, the key thing about human rights is about access. Do you have access to education? Do you have access to health? Do you have access to any economic opportunity? If you have a degree, can you just go and if you apply, you're going to go through a fair process? Well, guess what? That's not the case. So when somebody will go to the extent of almost putting their life in jeopardy, of leaving their family, their uncles, aunt, to go to another country where they might not even know somebody, it's because they cannot have the same opportunity in those countries. If they do have those opportunities in those countries, I guarantee you they will stay there. So we like to kind of bring this in the perspective of it's okay to look at those migrants and toughen up the visa process, but there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on those governments who do not respect the rule of law, who do not respect the basic human rights that they have actually signed treaties for. And we have a few examples. When you look at the 90s, you saw what happened in Ghana. Ghana went from parliamentary election a decade ago to presidential elections. The rule of law was actually, they changed the constitutions. And what we saw is there was a major amount of Ghanaians living in the diaspora that went back. Why would they go back? They go back because they feel like there's more protection for their rights, there's more opportunities. So we like to actually bring this conversation to, and this is what we're saying, we need to have this dialogue so that people don't just look at a migrant as somebody that just wants to come here and do whatever they want to do. It's because they don't have opportunities. I mean, the right to fair trial is part of the human rights. The right not to be detained for any political reason because you actually say something about the leadership. This is a violation. So until people really understand those rights, and as Sylvia here say, there's been a correlation saying that if the human rights are actually being protected, and we kind of bring up into this conversation, because that's the reason we're actually having this panel here.
Very good, very good. This is very important. That's very insightful. Well, I don't know if our
Declaration of Human Rights is the right to democracy. So if they didn't come legitimately through a democratic process, in other words, if they weren't elected, if it was a coup or something, there are automatically kind of not respecting human rights to begin with. So if you start on that footing of not respecting human rights as a start, you're probably going to get worse, not get better. So I think there is absolutely a direct correlation, and it's very difficult, but the population rising up and saying, no, we are going to do democracy and we're going to have elections.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Any right that I think just as a
Oh, it's starting to work. Go ahead, play.
So, okay, so you ready?
Large debates.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Non saprei, ma non andare complicatissimi.
We just take it for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live.
Equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided he'd change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. They documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. They noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights to people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them, and America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded, but the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe. But only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi. And in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. And never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. But what were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus, the natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So, in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed. And it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers, free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent, who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, and to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
Gabonese, American, part of CGR New York. So we are the activists doing the same thing here, but in New York City. And I found the video very interesting because it mentioned something. It spoke about the force of law, which was supposed to condone basically the rights, those human rights. in order to have the force of law to happen, there needs to be law and there needs to be enforcement. And we all understand that we combat and we fight in the forces of injustice. What has been done so far, if anybody, this is for anybody, right? What has been done so far in order to strengthen this force of law? Because we know the UN peacekeeping, etc., but we still don't understand, we still don't get the, where do we draw the line between the government disrespecting the human rights and the people actually fight there for also harming fellow human beings? How do we work it out? What has been done so far?
We're going to close the session because we have, for the sake of time, move to the next panel. And then any questions that you might have, even regarding this panel, there are cards around that you could always write down your questions. And if it's not answered during this session, we'll make sure that we get back to you.
Okay, so please make sure you write down your question on a piece of paper.
All right, thank you so much for the invitation. Joan Clark, thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm honored to be here, but this is very moving. It's one of my very first events that I've actually I've been moderating, particularly on this subject. So let me just get into the nitty-gritty of it. We have two panelists today. I believe one is supposed to be Skyping in. Correct? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Christian Combanyando, right? Yes. So do you want to go ahead and take a seat?
That is social. So like the rights, for example, for the handicapped people in my country, people with disabilities, prisoners, and then also education.
So I also understand that you use social media to bring awareness of many critical issues. What are some of those critical issues that are pressing in your work?
Okay, we've all been influenced by the new technology, internet, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all that. So being based in America, we kind of have some access, easy access to it and reasonable reflection by using it, every day. So what I've been trying to do is like every time I'll be going home, I will be using my camera and going on sites. Like I've been, I did a report. I went to the mental hospital of Gabon, which is called Hôpital Belén, and I did a report there. I was there for like almost 2 hours, and I was very shocked with what I saw. How mental people were taken care of, like abandoned to themselves. I used my camera with it. I went down site myself, and that's what I've been doing. So it was very direct, very live. It's nothing can be more than that, So, and I've been doing that, using my camera to go and touch. I went to the village also of the handicapped people where they are kept, and I touched it and I saw how they live. And it was a way to show it to the diaspora, because the Gabonese that were here, they would not believe me when I would be telling them that, oh, this and such, this is how it is. So it was a way for me to be in contact with them so they can really see how our people in Gabon were suffering, and it was real, so.
So would you say that it's mostly younger people that are more interested in what you do, or it's just a mix of all people?
I would say that it's mostly, I'm not going to say just young people, but any people that is interested in information, has some type of interest in their country. But my country is we have more, I mean, the youth is like 60%, I think, the population. So it's a young population. But, so definitely by then, they'll be the one that will be really following me and in what I do.
Okay. So what are some of the causes of the disabilities that you've seen in your country?
Wow. Well, my sister is a doctor, so sometimes I talk with her and I look around and see what is going on and when people are stressed out, they start to have mental disabilities. You also have poverty, no access to information. The no information, the politicians are not educating the population. So you have a lot of people who have children that will come with a disability problem, physical, because maybe they didn't take this medicine or they didn't follow this process while they were pregnant. So lack of information, and then stress and poverty.
That's very interesting because when you look at statistics, actually, our world is full of more younger people. And when you talk about that, you find that the youth actually are more stressed worldwide. And that's why, we have to engage the youth into being more productive beings. And also, when you talk about stress, I'll tell you that it's one of the biggest indicators, although those statistics are still very little, so we can't really put an actual number to how many people become diagnosed when it comes to stress. I'm glad you raised that point. So with your kind of work do you see any impact as far as awareness that you have?
Yes, I will definitely see. I mean, I'm not going to take like all the price on me, We've been doing it. I mean, there were other people that started doing it before me, like his name, I forgot his name again. He's from New York. He's older than me. Comment il s'appelle encore? I forgot his name. But then after the new group that came, that was Landry Washington, that is in jail right now. We had a French of Tan that is not here. You have me.
Mbamani.
Mbamani, yeah, that's the one I was trying to give the name. So, and then we came and we pushed. And in the beginning, people were making fun of us. They're like, oh, this guy did not have anything to do with me and all that. They're always on cameras talking about what's going on in the country. But they didn't know that we were trying to share information and kind of attract the attention of what was going on that is not right in our country. And little by little, people started, reacting. And the result is today, for the past 1 year, a population that was so defined as being so submissive, so what would I say, neglective, so not courageous, not brave. For 1 year now, they've been working around Trocadero. They've been everywhere in the world where there's any Gabonese protesting. Okay. So, and it's because of that activity, sharing the information via Facebook and YouTube.
Okay. Have you tried to address the stress level here within your work?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Good. All right, well, thank you so much. If you have any questions, please write them down. And at the end of this panel, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. So, Michelle, welcome. Let's go to Michelle. Michelle, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Actually, I'm Michelle Bap-Lewis, and I'm honored to be part of this panel today. I hope you guys are hearing me.
Hello?
I was saying that my name is Michelle Bap-Lewis, and I'm honored to be part of this panel. Actually, I've come to this country over 10 years ago, and I've come here with a background in business. And I went to University of Maryland also, and I graduated with a diploma in computer science. But I always have passion for people and how to improve life in general. So I became a certified coach, life coach, and I speak, I teach, I coach, and I also help people, especially in the area of finances. And that's about.
Okay, so that's very interesting, Michelle, because life coaching is one of my favorite things to talk about. Tell us about exactly what that means, because I'm sure we have some people in the audience that will be asking, what is that exactly?
Actually, when it comes to coaching, there's nothing that you can do and perform in whatever area of life that you choose without having somebody that's there for you, that show you what to do, that hold you accountable, and that takes you from where you see yourself right now and where you want to go. That's basically what a coach does. And like for an athlete to perform and to win, for an athlete to become number one for whatever discipline, he needs a coach. And if you look around, all those who have made it and become successful, they always had a coach with them, working closely and helping them achieve the goals.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. So with this particular life coaching, what would you advise, how would you advise people to go about it?
Actually, everybody and everyone needs a coach. It starts at a young age. We are, as parents, we are coach of our children because we show them the way, we tell them what to do, and we give them an environment that conditions them to become who they become in life. And later on, they can choose to better themselves or to stay in the stage that they have learned from the beginning. And when it comes to society, coaching plays a big role because unless you have someone who is expert in an area, whatever you do is stay as an amateur level.
Okay. So when it comes to psychological trauma, how would we bring a life coach to psychological trauma?
The coach work one-on-one. The coach have time to spend with the person who is traumatized, to listen, because first of all, when someone goes through a trauma, that person is going through tremendous pain. It goes on the physical level, it goes also on the emotional level. And in our society, especially when it comes to Africa, it's a little hard to express ourselves because first thing is always looking around, who is there when I'm speaking? Can I speak freely? Because when we look at democracy in America, where we hear people saying everything that they think about whoever is in power without having the fear to being arrested or anything like that, is not always the case in African countries.
That's actually a very good point because, being an African myself, we have this cultural thing whereby we can't express ourselves. We don't want anybody to know what's going on with us. And, having a life coach, that's really makes a whole lot of sense. However, I think, within our communities, I find, again, my background is community health and education. And when it comes to psychological trauma, we have seen that, looking just at those pictures, we've seen that a lot of those pictures are man-made violence, which are from either political violence, human rights abuses, criminal violence, rape, child abuse, sexual abuse. And in the event of our survivors, they tend to carry on diagnoses which also have everlasting trauma. Like Christian talked about stress in the youth pictures. The youth are our leaders for tomorrow. When they look at these pictures, immediately it becomes a psychological trauma. So what we do here in the United States under my nonprofit, we are the Mental Health Association of Greater Washington Counties. And what we do, we educate our communities on mental health first aid, to recognize those signs and symptoms, to be able to help communities to access resources. We live in the greatest country in the world where resources are available, but does that mean that people actually are getting to those resources? No. One of the reasons why is we have this cultural thing about us. We don't want anybody to know what's going on with us, right? Right? Yes. So my job in the community is to demonstrate that, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to seek help. And in the way of doing this is we start with faith-based organizations, because we know that this is where we go. This is where we feel at home, in our churches, in our mosques. So we start with that, we educate our leaders, our religious leaders, on what mental health is. You know, that's where also the life coaching comes in. We try to tell our communities that it's okay to seek help. And in the event of doing this, we provide self-help resources. Our health and human services have a lot of resources which are also translated in so many different languages. I brought some resources which are out on the outside the door, which are also in French, Spanish, English, and there's so many other languages. So this really is very, this particular event today is very important, with psychological trauma being one of those things. As immigrants, when we migrate to this country, we come with a lot of things with us, things that we don't talk about. So I'm glad that we had this event. Back in February, we had an event and was themed Mental Health No Longer a Taboo in the African Immigrant Diaspora Communities. It was well received, and in the event of that, we've realized that, you know, a lot of people now are coming up to seek help, to get educated, and to recognize those signs and symptoms that can help people. Okay? So, Christian, let me go back to you. So, in case, in the event of, let's say, the youth in the United States that are having such a difficult time to assimilate in this society, how would you advise? How would you advise in the event of that, who are having a hard time? Because we know that when we migrate, sometimes we migrate with all our children in here. So how would you advise the youth that are having a hard time assimilating in this society?
Well, you know, I believe the youth are those who are very open to learn easily, you know, without resistance. So it's just to give them the information where they can go to the library, you know, watch educational program on TV, you know, ask questions, you know. So and I believe like kids, you know, they really know how to adjust themselves if you give them the assets, you know, like computer, and make sure you code your computer so that they can't just go anywhere they want, you know, but to get information, the good information, and answer to questions that they have. That's all. You know, share information with them.
So it's more education and awareness,
yes,
which is good, yeah, and that's what we should do, more education and awareness for our communities. All right. So, John Clark. All right. So I guess if you have any questions, please.
See Brady? You see those people are arrested and they are in their panties, underwears. So imagine in the 21st century, a president with his government who promotes humiliation of citizens, fathers, mothers, almost naked in front of the international world, in the media. And this is taken by policemen. Police, I think police is supposed to protect the citizen, is supposed to serve the citizen, not to come and humiliate them, just because you want to serve the so-called president. Okay? Now, to answer his question, I was detained in the Gabonese prison for 83 days. And they really did a mistake to put me there, and I have to say, because, you know, in my country, when you are, in most countries in Africa, when you are an activist or a politician, and let's say you get detained, normally when you come out, after seeing and experiencing all that atrocity, it's like it's a bargain for you. Like you can threaten the government and say, you know, if you don't promote me or if you don't put me in this position, I'm gonna tell the world that you guys are doing this and that. Because as I'm talking right now, the president of the former president of telecommunication, he was in jail. One of the counselor of the president of Ali Bongo, so I'm talking about Bill Binze, I'm talking about Hervé Opianga, they've been detained in those prisons from an inch. So that what does that tell you? That tells you that Hervé Opianga was supposed to release a book about the jail. He never did release it because in exchange he got promoted. Billy Binze also, I don't know what reason he got, I think it's check or something, got arrested. Now he's promoted to be Minister of Communication.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Christian. With that you're saying,
It's happening in Gabon, how human rights are being violated. People are treated like zombies. You know, I mean, I would say half human. You know, because it's violent. You know, and it's very, very unhuman, because you will see people that are today in the government that are not even trying, that are today in the government that were in that jail, and they're not even trying to make a change for that jail, because we're talking about humanity. We're talking about humanity. I could not, for nothing in this world, I would have come down of that place and started to say, you know what, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm writing a book about it, but I would start saying, you know, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to write a book. Promote me. You know, let's talk about it. No, I took my courage and I say, even if today I can't go back to my country because I did that, I said, you know, all those I had access to pictures, and I made sure that those pictures went to France 24. Observateur and everything, so that no human being again would go through this, because that's what I've learned in America. I went to school here, and then you're supposed to always try to make life better to other humankind.
have you tried to work with some of the international human rights organizations to bring this particular issue on the front line?
Yes, I've tried. I've worked also with one of the leads at the Human Rights Organization.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in contact also
Amnesty
with
International.
Amnesty International, and all that. So I'm trying my way, you know, and that's why I'm giving my time. You know, I mean, anytime I have a chance to talk about it, I give it, because things need to change. We need to change the way we think. Africans, we are human beings. We're not half human. We're human beings, so we have rights. So if you see something that is not right, say it. And you know, any dictator will stay in power forever, eternally, if you don't, if you don't speak, if you don't denounce it. You have to do testimony. You have to testify. You have to talk.
Yeah.
You have to.
But I think that one of the reasons why I guess people are silent. Some of us, if we continue doing the work here, then we have to worry about our families back home. What's going to happen to them? So in the event of having family back home and we're doing this work, what kind of suggestions would you give, or what kind of advice would you give? Because they still have to be either in hiding or stay away from the public.
I'm gonna tell you something. With these ways, you're done. So, and somebody has to do it. Someone has to do it. I watched the video. Martin Luther King, Steve Biko, Mandela, any activist, any person that fought for human rights, you have to fight, you have to stand. I'm not telling people here to go and kill someone. I'm just saying, speak. Speak. Talk. Tell to people how you're feeling. Because I hope the so-called president of Macron, because I totally have no respect. Because how can you be a president and promote violence? How can you be president and not protect your people, those who voted you? How can you be president and you're the first one to disrespect the law? How can you be a president and be the chief of everything in your country? How can you be president? I mean, it makes no sense, and that makes Africa look bad.
That's true. So I guess, you know, as the young, the adults, or the issues of human rights, but more so, you know, what are the real rights, you know, when it comes to trying to promote democracy on the continent of Africa. Right?
If I can add to Africa, it's the way the government is like a little kingdom where the president is the king, and he has control over the constitution, he has control over the army, he has control over the administration, and all that is put together actually to maintain that person in power. And the way that the community can come together, first of all, is by peace. Because attacking the attacker by responding from violence to violence is not always a solution. And if when we come to elections and then one side has won, because always one will win and the other will lose for that time. If we come together as the people that are fighting, understand that we have to come to a level where we discuss without having to kill each other, because we do not share the same ideas, but that doesn't make us enemies. And it starts at the little cell, the family. How are we discussing in our families? How are we making our ideas? How are we letting our children express themselves? And all that comes back to the culture. The suppression of some women not to talk in public. The little girl that's supposed to learn more how to cook instead of being upfront and choose to embrace the career that she will love for her own life. It comes to those little things that will go and be able to impact the whole community. And it rolls back to what? To love. To be able to love ourselves and to love the neighbor.
That's true.
Because the tribe, the racism, we are all created equal on the earth by the supreme power, the God, and that's all they call the highest source.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle and Christian. I guess our time is up.
Great. So any questions? Any questions for the panels? I mean, if you learned something, we're going to make sure that the picture that Christian Commemorating was going to actually have available, we'll make sure that we share that with you. And what it does, it actually show you the circumstances, the situation in which people are actually experiencing in jail, where people are being brought raw food, and they have to find a way for them to actually cook. Where if you need toothpaste, toothbrush, that's not provided in a jail. So if you've been incarcerated in the interior of the country and brought into the main city and you don't have a family member there, you're pretty much left to yourself. And these are serious human rights violations. When you see the government spending money on things that really don't add any particular GDP to the country economy, or they will actually spend money lobbying the rest of the world to have a good image. But the treatment of the people on the ground is actually left to almost 2 centuries ago. This is, in this century, this is unacceptable. So in that aspect, we're gonna actually go to the next panel. And the next panel actually talks about what are your perspectives as a human being, as a citizen, if your rights have been violated. If you've been fined under arbitrary arrest, if you've been tortured, what are the remedies available? What can you do if you are inside the country or if you left the country? For that particular wonderful panel, we have one and only greatest, I call her Madam Secretary, Chief Justice. Her name is Cheryl Westbrook Bennett, and she's going to be the one actually engaging you on this next panel. So Cheryl.
Claude, the president of Gddhr, let me say it in English, Gddhr, so the Gabonese Diaspora for Human Rights, for Democracy, Human Rights, and Good Governance, has stated, my name is Cheryl Bennett. I am the chair of the legal committee of Gddhr. It's an honor for me today to moderate this panel discussion on the legal perspectives on human rights and good governance, the International Criminal Court, alternative remedies, and transitional justice. So I'm particularly honored to welcome as our panelists today Ms. Deborah Cotton, who will be joining us actually via Skype. Oh, and there she is on the screen. Hi, Deborah. Hopefully she can hear me.
No.
So that's what you hear. Muya, you could join us at the head table. So Muya is an attorney with the Center for Human Rights and Bar Association. And then lastly, we also have with us Mr. Scott Carlson, who is the CEO and president of New Rule. And to get a sense of how, moving forward, we can ensure that there are some safeguards that are put in place to deal with past abuses, but also prevent future ones. So we'll start with Deborah, and again, I'm hoping that she can hear as well. We've passed around a handout that Deborah has prepared on one on her remarks today, but then also on the International Criminal Court that provides you some information, and I hope and I think that you will find it very valuable. So Ms. Deborah Cotton, as I mentioned, she's a published author and renowned scholar with much of her research focusing on the International Criminal Court. So, Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you, but really what we'd like to hear right now is for you to maybe take some time to educate us on the ICC and the types of crimes that arise under its jurisdiction and who can be a party there.
I would like to thank the Gddhr for inviting me to be among such a distinguished panel. And I'm glad that everybody was able to come together today. So I'd like to introduce the ICC to you in reference to the Gabon case that is currently at the ICC, so everyone can have a little bit more information as to what this entails. So first I will go into a brief history of the ICC, cover the crimes under the court and the jurisdiction, and then I will take questions from the panel and the audience after I go over the Gabonese case. The Nuremberg and Tokyo trials address war crimes, crimes against peace, and crimes against humanity. But after the Cold War, tribunals like the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda were the result of consensus that impunity is unacceptable. Because they were established to try crimes committed only within a specific time frame and during a specific conflict, there was general agreement that an independent permanent court was needed. So in July of 1998, the international community reached a historic milestone when 120 states adopted the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court entered into force on July 2002 after ratification by 60 countries. There are currently 124 state parties. If you can look at your handout that I provided, you can see the states and cases as of August 2017. As regards Gabon and the continent of Africa, it has the largest block of state parties, which is 34 parties thus far. So Africa has been a very large proponent of the International Criminal Court before its inception and before it was come into effect in July 2002. The admissible crimes under the ICC are the most serious crimes of concern to the international community, namely genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and aggression. Each of these crimes is clearly defined in the Rome Statute. If you will look at the handout that I gave you my email address, the International Criminal Court's website, where you can find additional information which, due to time constraints, I will not be able to discuss here. But I will go into the initial crimes of the court and what they entail generally. The crime of aggression was added on just recently in Uganda in 2010, but there has to be a required number of states to sign on to this before it comes into force. But today, namely, we'll be going over genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, just because of the referrals from Gabon, from President Odongo and John Ping. Those are the crimes that I will cover first. First is the crime of genocide. For the purpose of the statute, genocide means any of the following acts: killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life to bring about its physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births, forcibly transferring children of one group to another. Now, even under all of those definitions of genocide, there are elements of each crime. So I would refer you to the International Criminal Court's website and the Rome Statute so you can read those in detail, because due to time constraints, again, I can't cover all those, although I wish I could. The second one is war crimes. The court has jurisdiction in respect of war crimes when committed as part of a plan or policy of a large-scale commission of such crimes. And for the purpose of the statute, war crimes means grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions, namely any of the following acts perpetrated against persons or property protected under provisions of the relevant Geneva Conventions. For example, intentionally launching an attack and the knowledge that such attack will cause loss of life to civilians or damage to civilian objects, attacking or bombarding buildings, which I have brought up because of what happened in the elections in Gabon, killing or wounding combatants, and etc. Crimes against humanity, for the purpose of this statute, means any of the following acts when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against the civilian population.